Aloha and welcome to ʻAha Wahine Kūhinapapa. This is a webinar series celebrating intergenerational women of Hawaii. We are so excited for our webinar tonight. We've been doing this series for going on 2 years now, and it's just a way to empower our wahine to showcase the amazing wahine that we have across the islands and to come into your home and to talk story with you. This series will be going on for probably the next 4 or 5 months. Look for it every single month. We'd like to thank all of our sponsors, most especially Hawaii People's Fund, who is funding this webinar series, Papa Ololokahi, o EVTV, Maili Kukahi, Roots at Kokua Kalihi Valley, University of Hawaii, and Ekolu Mea Nui. They are all contributing to help us to bring this series to you every month. And as we begin this series, it's full of abundance as we're closing out at the end of Pikua Wakea and also fondly remembering our friend Cami and her 1-year anniversary. We send much love and aloha out to her family as we start tonight. Mahalo for joining us.
All right, so aloha nui kako. Very, very excited. I'm Anue Nue Punua. And mahalo to Auntie Kaiulani Odom for starting us off and to really help us move along our ʻAha Wahine Kūhinapapa series for this past year. I'm excited to introduce some of my really good friends who are, close friends from college, from working at the fish pond, from Olalo Hawaii and our community. If you don't know these wahine, I don't know where you have been because they are amazing in all the things that they do. But for most of us who like to sport some really nice lole, Kealopiko, I want to present na wahine o Kealopiko, Hina Nubo, Ane Bakudes, and Jamie Makasobe. And tonight they're gonna talk a little bit about, share how their story of how Kealopiko started, and no Papa Ke Aloha, how practice impacts ʻāina and kanaka in the fashion industry. So while we're on this, don't forget, if you have any questions, you can chat, throw some questions into the chat and we'll be monitoring that. And hopefully we'll have some time to answer those questions. Well, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and I'm gonna shoot it over to you folks. Aloha nui. Mahalo for being here. Maybe you could just give a brief introduction and where you're calling in from. Thank you.
Sure. Aloha nui mai kako. I'm Hina Puamohala Nubo, and I am a Maui originally, but I am currently in Aotearoa in Tamaki, Makaurau, which is Auckland, and I'm missing my ʻāina aloha, but happy to be here with my 2 hoʻapili. Aloha nui kako. Mahalo ka hiki ana mai i keia wahi kūkākūkā ana o kako.
Aloha mai kako. I'm Ane Bakudes, and I'm originally from Waianae, Oahu, but I live on Molokaʻi in Kaunakakai, well, in Kalamoʻula, on my home or my husband's homestead. And on this site is where we have our Kealopiko factory, if you want to call it that. The room behind me was the old factory, but we outgrew that as it was part of my home, and now it's just up the road. So mahalo nui everyone for joining.
Aloha nui kako. I'm Jamie from Kaneohe, Oahu, but currently in Kealopiko. I got a background band behind me with the Koki Frogs tonight, but mahalo for joining us this evening. Aloha.
Mahalo kako. Should I go for it?
Yeah, hikino, mahalo.
Again, Velina nui kako. I think our title tonight kind of says it all. No Papa Ke Aloha. We thought we'd focus on kind of the story of why we've chosen to walk the path we have as a Hawaiian fashion company, and sort of the stories and places that we draw inspiration from and the things that ground us in our business choices and our business practices. So I'm just going to share my screen. I have one slide to share as we talk story. Okay, everybody can see that? Okay. So yeah, when we first started talking about doing this panel together, it kind of quickly came up that we wanted to share about, again, why we kind of make the choices that we do as a company. There's a lot of different ways to do fashion. And we've made some distinct choices that are grounded in a foundation of, for us, moʻopuna aloha. And so if we kind of look all the way back to our earliest stories and chants of creation, like the kumulipo, those kind of moʻopuna aloha give us kind of like a framework or a foundational set of values that, you know, we can choose to live by as close as we can. And of course, nobody's perfect. We're all trying, and, you know, everything's a work in progress, but there are great guidelines, I think, that come out of those really foundational pieces that our kupuna left for us. And I think probably a lot of us share that as a grounding, things like the kumulipo and just moʻopuna aloha in general. And I think that we share that and people can relate to it because it helps us understand kind of our place in the scheme of things. And so when we look at the kumulipo, for instance, we can see that as kanaka, we're placed after all of these plants and animals and people that allowed for us to emerge. And so in that lineage is Laʻilaʻi, who is arguably one and the same with Haumea and Hina. And so these akua that come down, they also come after the plants and the animals. And so all of these living beings, we all share Papa, Haumea, as this living space together. And so we try to remember when we're making our choices about how to run our business, that we need to consider that whole collective ohana, and try to minimize the impact that we have on that ohana, because we do share the space together, and all of those things are our kupuna. And yeah, and so operating by those values is really a choice for us. You know, again, there's a lot of different ways to choose to do fashion. But as kanaka, for us, for our business, it's really important for us to kind of ground ourselves in those things, because that's what our kupuna left for us. And if we choose not to ground in that, then we also kind of have to think about, okay, well, what are the impacts of that? And it's a really important set of things to think about, because we live in a world today where climate change is upon us. It's a pretty intense situation that we're in terms of our impact as kanaka on Papa, on this earth that we share. The fashion industry is the second largest polluter in the world, next to oil. And so all of our choices are really important. And even though we're just one small company, we still are accountable to our kupuna. We may not be a huge corporation, and we may not be having the biggest impact as something like Zara or Banana Republic or another big brand, but we have an impact. And so we have to think about, who are we accountable to? Well, we're accountable to all of that lineage that allows for us to be here. And so when we think about that, and we think about our place and Papa, Haumea, there's just all kinds of neat stories around her come up. And one of them is kind of maybe a less commonly known story. So I wanted to just do a little ha'i mo'olelo before we dive into our particular business practices, because this story highlights how Papa, Haumea, has the power to, she gives us all of this abundance, right? She gives us all of this the gifts of birth, the plant life, like all of these things that sustain us. She gives us all of that. Those are her gifts, but she also has the power to take all of that away. And so we see that in a couple different stories. And so one of them is called No Keaohoku, and it's a story that Kamakau penned and put into the newspapers. But he published it right before he started the series that became what's now known as Tales and Traditions. So all his writings were taken out of the newspaper and published in different volumes, translated and published. And so Tales and Traditions is the earliest works. But there's a couple stories right before that that didn't quite make their way into that, I think. And so this is one of them. And it takes place on Oahu in the time of Wailoa, who was one of Haumea's grandsons and partners. But at that time, Wailoa is living there, and Kapahu Eleele, who is one of Haumea's granddaughters, is living on Oahu as well. And there's a man named Kulauka, and he decides that he really wants Haumea's granddaughter. He thinks she's beautiful, and he wants to be with her. But instead of being sort of honorable about how he approached that, he decided he was going to be sneaky. And so he made a glider out of ie, and he put bird feathers all on the outside, and he made wings, and he had strings inside so he could pull it and flap the wings and maneuver the glider. And he decided that he was going to swoop down and steal Haumea's granddaughter. And so he did just that. He built this glider, and he had all these test flights. And when the thing was finally ready to go, he flew his glider, and he flew down onto a pali and called Lelepua, and Kapahu Eleele was there, and he swooped in and he grabbed her, and Haumea instantly knew someone has taken my granddaughter. And so she jumps into action, and like she does, she's this wāhine hoʻopaha o haʻokino, right? She can turn herself into different things, and she's got all these amazing powers. So she unleashes her flying power, and she's flying after this man who's got her granddaughter. And he's flying in his glider, and he's got the granddaughter, and she flies up, and she's getting pretty close. She can see him, but she can't quite see everything that he's holding. And what he does, he's so tricky, he's so cunning, he drops a pohaku, and the pohaku starts falling, and she thinks that's her granddaughter. So Haumea goes diving down, and she realizes as she gets close to the ground that it's not her. She was going to dive down and grab her and save her. And she realizes it's a pohaku, and that she's been duped by this man. And so what she decides to do is totally retaliate. And she takes away all the food plants on Earth. And she unleashes a huge drought, and everything becomes hot. And the day and the night become the same temperature. It's warm all of the time. Everything's drying up. There's no food, and people start to perish everywhere. And what comes out of this is the need for almost everyone is gone. There's very few kanaka living. Her own ohua, her own ukali are left on Oahu, and she leaves them ki and popolo to survive on, and that's it. Other than that, there's nothing. It's hard to find water. Everything is crazy. But there's a handful of people left, and what happens is they have to figure out how to sail away to other lands where there are food plants so that they can bring them back again. And so what Haumea did is she took away all that abundance. She said, okay, if you're going to take my granddaughter, which essentially is robbing from the future, taking something that doesn't belong to you and taking from your descendants that are coming later. It's taking from the future. And so she just said no. And so what it forced people to do was to innovate and to evolve. And I think that's the real gift of Haumea, is evolution. And she shows us in her other stories ways that we can look at what she's done and see the lessons in that, and progress in our own lives if we want to apply those different ha'awina that she leaves for us. And so the story goes on to talk about how they set up and got ready for voyaging and stuff. But the impetus was this idea of taking from the future. And so it's stories like that that kind of inspire us, because when we choose not to live by the values our kupuna left us, and to, especially in fashion, to, not try to lessen our impact, we essentially are robbing from the future, right? We're leaving Papa in a state that our moʻopuna, kua kahi, kua lua, kua meala, kua hiala are going to have to deal with. So that's just one of the interesting stories that we draw inspiration from and that guide us in our practices. And so, yeah, to talk a little bit more specifically about what some of those things are, I'll hand it off to my hoa. I'll stop sharing screen. Lady, all right.
Aloha, this is Ane speaking. Yeah, so one of our main practices from early on was making sure that Kealopiko was a eco-friendly brand, meaning that the materials that we use, the actual textiles and their creation were created in a pono way. So we really have always shied away from synthetic materials, and we just use natural fibers. And so those natural fibers particularly are, cotton. And when we first started, the eco-friendly fashion was just getting started. And so I think our first year, there wasn't really the opportunity to use organic cottons. But then as, time evolved and, we've now been in business for 16 years, we're able to source organic cottons all made in the United States. And we really shoot for that because another part of our values is to support our own economy. And no one's really going cotton in Hawaii, so we can't, make our own fabrics here. But so we look to what's closest and what will then sustain us. And instead of going overseas, we stay within America. The other neat and fun fact, if you guys don't know, I'm also a botanist, but when I say that Hawaiian, we don't have any cotton grown in Hawaii or in our fashion and our clothing, it's actually not true. So back in the early 1920s, there was a disease that was threatening all cotton across America and overseas. And then scientists started looking for disease-resistant cotton to this particular disease. And our Hawaiian cotton, ma'o, Gossypium tomentosa, was one of them that was resistant. And so they actually hybridized our Hawaiian cotton with the commercial cotton. So actually every piece of cotton that you wear now, organic or not, actually has Hawaiian lineage in it, which is really a fun fact. But anyways, so from the actual fibers woven that we choose to use for our company to the ink that we put on it, we use all water-based ink, which is not toxic and is dissolved in water and can be put back into our soil without causing further contamination, and even down to the type of dye that we use to color our fabrics. So that's like the basic process of how we make those conscious choices. We pay a little bit more money to do those things because the natural dyes, the water-based inks all cost more. But for us, it's going back to that value base of we don't feel right if we're going to be contributing to polluting our ʻāina and polluting Papa and Haumea. So there's that level of practice, but then also with how we ship out our garments, we choose not to use plastic. If they are shipped in a plastic container, it's a recycled plastic. Also going back to our fabric, sometimes we will use polyester, but it's a recycled polyester. So just making those conscious choices of what we're actually making, and then things that like sometimes you just can't make them because there's no natural or eco-friendly alternative. We just kind of choose not to make them at all. They're just not part of our product list. But then it also continues further into the whole process. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with making garments, and usually you lay out your fabric and you cut your pattern and you have a lot of excess. You have these extra scraps that you can't make another aloha shirt from or dress from, but you could make something else. So kind of to the extreme where we basically, we have a no waste like policy for how we conduct our business. So everything that, or every piece of fabric that we construct from start to finish, we're using every bit. I say that in the terms of we're gonna cut up the scraps into tiny squares and use them for baby quilts. We're gonna make stuffed animals from them. The stuffing that we put into the stuffed animals is actually scrap fabric that we is the excess from our cuts. So we basically don't throw away any fabric. It's all used. And then, you know, because it's all organic, you could actually, if you didn't want to use it anymore, you could use it as compost in your garden. And at our facility here on Molokai, like we just use water to clean everything. There's no like toxic chemicals needed to clean screens or anything like that. And all that water goes out to water our banana patch. And eventually we're going to start planting a Welke patch. So the water from our warehouse will go back into making more cloth.
Exciting. Can I add something just real quick, Ane, on the zero waste thing? Is that what Ane is talking about really does add another layer of work, but it also adds more value too. So instead of seeing those offcuts as waste, we see them as potential new product, and we see them as things that, you know, we can bring back in and upcycle and use. But it does take another layer of work. You know, we have to get that all collected up from the various places that it is sent to us. You know, we work in small spaces. Sometimes we've got huge bags of scraps, and then eventually those all get processed down to little things. But, you know, you have to have the willingness to deal with that extra material and to figure out what to do with it. So again, like innovating with what you have, and then being willing to take that time, you know, and arguably, you know, like Ane was saying, you can make more money if you take your production overseas, right? It's a lot cheaper to make clothes in Indonesia or Vietnam or wherever it is. But then what happens to all that waste that's over in somebody else's ʻāina, you know? And so we can only think about, or well, like we try not to think about our impact only on Hawaii, because actually being as isolated as we are, so many things are shipped in, right? And so when we look at carbon miles, we still have carbon miles on the fabric that we ship in, on the things that we use, but we can reduce those by the business choices that we make. So like Ane was saying, we're in Hawaii, we deal with people in America to make some things for us. We try to source fabrics from close by so that we can just look for all the different ways that we can reduce. But those again are choices, and they take extra work, which, you know, some people might look at it as extra work, but it also contributes extra value too. And so it's about kind of being open and rethinking the traditional ways that fashion is done, and, you know, what you can do and what's possible. So yeah, I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, I think like just your sharing alone kind of brings a whole new perspective on that, the whole process of what you folks, you know, we only see the end products, right? And a lot of times we'll go in and we'll see what we like and all these things, but to know how environmental, I know you folks personally, but I don't think others realize the impact of the fashion industry on our world. Maybe we don't want to think about it, you know? And kind of listening to what you folks are sharing is so refreshing that I hope everybody out there is listening.
Mahalo.
I also want to add like another way that we contribute back to Papa and Haumea's legacy is that you know, we've made this conscious choice to do our production in Hawaii, and that means that we are supporting our own economy. We're providing jobs for other wahine here in Hawaii, and so not just in Hawaii itself. Like we have our store on Oahu and our like distribution center on Oahu, but we've also made this conscious choice to be on Molokai and to do our production here. And that is another expense that we just incur because of the value that it brings to us, and that we are able to provide jobs here on Molokai in a very, you know, rural community where there's not a lot of opportunity. And a lot of our Hawaiian women, you know, don't have a chance to to get educated, or they, you know, they had kids young, or they just have a lot of kids and they don't have that time to really invest in themselves. And so we're able to provide, you know, well-paying jobs for them, medical and all the other benefits, but also just a sense of being that they're contributing to their culture and the perpetuation of that culture through our mo'olelo, through our practices and the, you know, the business practices in particular. And also just building the sense of community amongst wahine, just like in this seminar series of ʻAha Wahine, is that we've created this network, you know, for other Hawaiian women where we can just, you know, have a support system for each other. And we've been blessed to be able to do retreats, to, you know, take our Oahu people to Molokai and Molokai people to different islands. And you can just see the growth and you know, pride in our wahine. And that in itself is that perpetuation of haumea, because they're all mothers and they're all having kids and they all are sharing that on and further. Another business practice that we do is, especially on Molokai, is that, you know, we kind of work around the school schedule, around the mom schedule. So our normal like workshop hours are 8 to 3, because that's when our keiki are in school. And we really want to support, you know, moms being home with their kids when they're at home. So all of these choices that we've been making partly are actually for us, because we're moms too. But it's a choice that we're making, and that culture that we're trying to perpetuate within our own business.
There you are.
That's amazing. I also didn't know all the things. I knew you guys were very conscious, but I just listening to all of these things, you think, oh, what if every company could be this conscientious, right? Wouldn't our world just be in a totally different place right now? Jamie, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about innovation and creativity. Where are you in this whole process of everything?
Yeah, just kind of hearing Hina and Ane talk about a little bit of our design story and how we kind of started as a business. It reminded me about our early meetings that the three of us would have in a cafe or at town restaurant, and really how we approached business strategies and business planning, of how we wanted to apply our mo'olelo through fashion. What Hina and Ane didn't mention is that the three of us, we don't have a background in fashion or in clothing design, textile design. You know, our background is botany, fish ponds, Olelo Hawaii. And really when we thought of this idea of starting a clothing business, from day one, it was how could we apply all of the values that we see or saw of our kupuna doing and apply it in a modern context and use fashion as the vehicle or the medium to kind of express these types of messages and express these types of values, because we know every day we get up and we dress ourselves, right? And what we put on indicates how we're feeling, what we believe in. You know, it's a statement on top of comfort or what the occasion is of what you're showing up for. And so for us, like it was kind of this fun case study of how can we integrate all these ways of how we wanted, like we're in our early 20s at the time, how we wanted to create a lifestyle for ourselves and for our future families and apply it in this business model. What we didn't know for 10 years was that, or maybe even more, that we had no idea that we were kind of just creating our own trend or our own model of business. We had no idea what we're doing. We really didn't have any guidance in how we're going to plan it or make it happen. And so really it was about the three of us coming together in conversation, but also the conversations that I would have with Anuenue at the fish pond, or what Ane and Hina were talking about in the forest doing botany work, and applying those kinds of connections into a modern Hawaiian business model. And I remember when Ane kind of presented the two of us with the question, okay, are we going to do this or what? Are we going to make this business or what? And I remember my response was, I only want to do it if we're going to be a successful business, Native Hawaiian business, because it's important. It was kind of like a time where we weren't really seeing many kanaka be entrepreneurs. And so it wasn't about what we could start as a trend fashionably or like the best dress we could make. It really was about, okay, how can we really immerse ourselves in this modern context of business and be successful and model the value systems of our kupuna. And so the three of us really thought in complex ways of how could we apply it. And, you know, Ane and Hina just shared a little bit about that. And, you know, those conversations started almost 17 years ago. And what Hawaiian fashion looked like 17 years ago to what it is today, we could have never imagined being a part of it, you know, or even being trendsetters, or even imagining, oh, we can build our own factory, you know. The three of us, we traveled a lot throughout the Pacific, visiting our cousins, and, you know, those experiences, dyeing pareo in the backyard or visiting Maohi in Tahiti and seeing, you know, these little factories where it was very family based, were very inspiring to us. We had no idea the impact, I guess, at the time, but I guess we had an idea that we wanted to create a very important and pono impact with starting a modern business, you know, in fashion. So yeah, what we're seeing today in 2022, 16 years later, Hawaiian fashion is booming. Hawaiian entrepreneurship is booming. You know, hopefully it continues to boom and get better and bigger, because we know how we value each other and our amazing skill sets of what our kupuna passed on to us. You know, the sky is the limit of what we can create as kanaka, and the new industries, the new mindset of thinking about new industries and applying our own value systems into those practices, you know, that have been really foreign and kind of out of touch for us for a long time. You know, that commercialism is scary, you know, it comes from colonization. And so thinking about how you can be a Hawaiian business person in a pono way is sometimes a really hard conversation with yourself, you know, and not only yourself, with your community. But it's really inspiring times right now. Like I said, I don't think the three of us could ever imagine that there would be mo'olelo tags connected to purses or diapers, or, you know what I mean? Like there's all this great energy kind of happening with within the fashion industry, our own fashion industry that we're creating. And I guess you know, something that the three of us would love to see more of is, you know, just applying our systems of aloha ʻāina into it in every way that you can. You know, it's possible, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying it's easy or the cheapest decision. It's most likely not, but it's possible. And I think it starts with, you know, a lot of our own people valuing those things, because the economy that, you know, Kealopiko is strong in is our own kanaka economy. And so how do you make that circular? How do you keep it within our lahui, you know, and raise each other up so that it's not hard to value that, and that we all kind of get it, you know, and it begins to kind of spread and connect to others, you know. So
Whose idea was it to do the mo'olelo cards? Because, you know, most of my other clothes, the tags, I just throw them away, but I actually really do have a little set of Kealopiko tags that I've kept because I love the artwork and the mo'olelo. How did that come
Oh,
about?
that's so nice. That was something that we all wanted, but that was something that I kind of saw as a place in Kealopiko where I could contribute, because at the time I was a student of Olelo Hawaii. I was doing my undergrad, finishing my undergrad and about to go into my master's degree in Olelo Hawaii. But I think I was still undergrad or just had graduated when we started. And so we all had different kind of, like Jamie was saying, we all came from these different backgrounds. And so we all had different things that we wanted to see, but we all agreed together, like, yes, the three of us want to have, we want to present the story and the research behind the designs that we do. Because they're not just based in like, oh, I think this is pretty, like we actually do research for all of the designs that we do. And that research has only deepened over the years. And now we're trying to share more of that. Like, that's why we have this Mo'olelo site now, is because, when we're researching a design, I'll like dive into the Hawaiian language newspapers and into other sources, and I'll look at all of these things, and 90% of what I do you can't see it. It's like condensed down into this like mo'olelo tag this big that's like, so 10% of, what I find or what we talk about makes it onto the card, but there's all of this other background stuff, right? Individual stories and experiences that we have, connections that we have with these particular designs. Mo'olelo kupuna, Olelo Hawaii from, way back when they were first starting to print the newspapers, kanaka, all sorts of things find their way into our mo'olelo cards. And so, yeah, that's really a thing that all three of us share a value on. And then, also trying to evolve those and then make them bilingual was another kind of big step for us. And that's been something really, really fun for me too, because then I get to not only pull old language from the newspapers and from mo'olelo and things from the past, language from our kupuna, right, which is really just the gold standard. So not only do we get to put that out there, but I get a chance to also practice my own Olelo Hawaii and to haku and write and and compose maka Olelo Hawaii and present almost two different stories of the same thing. There's a little overlap sometimes, but it's really nice to be truly bilingual where we can tell one story, maka Olelo Hawaii, and then another story, maka Olelo Haole. And so that's just a really fun part of it. And I really want to just mahalo everybody who supports us, because that's what you support. Like when you choose to buy a Kealopiko garment, not only are you supporting our zero waste practices, these strands of sort of mālama ʻāina and mālama kanaka that run through our business, but it's that mālama ike and that ho'oka'a ike and that, sharing of olelo, mo'olelo, that when you guys purchase from us, it helps to pay for that time for me to go in and research stories, for us to pull from our respective experiences and pool that knowledge and then bring it to those stories. And so that's another thing that that you support when you support us. And it's just nice. It's like, I never thought I would have a job. Like, you study Olelo Hawaii and it's like, okay, you got couple choices. Like you can become a teacher or you can become a teacher. And I want to mahalo every single kumu out there, because teaching is not an easy job. And, I did it for a very short time, and I don't think I'm cut out necessarily to be a traditional teacher anyway. So, like Jamie was saying, we had to kind of like pioneer sort of new spaces and ways of doing things. And this was another place where Olelo Hawaii could be supported. Another thing that somebody with Olelo Hawaii skills could do with all that ike that, I was so thankful to learn. So it's just, yeah, it's about, I think, trusting yourself, which is really hard sometimes, but I think we had to really trust ourselves when we made all these choices. Like there was no template, there was no, we had a couple people who came before us that were doing, maybe sort of similar things that we could sort of look to, but a lot of the things that we decided to do, there wasn't a template for. And so we had to trust ourselves that we were grounding ourselves in the values of our kupuna and then making our choices from there. Because we didn't know what we were doing, but we just found a way.
Well, I have a question, because I know like in the early on, like you said, you weren't sure what how all of this was going to happen and how it was going to holomua. But I do know when you folks started, was it like the first kickoff was makahiki, like the calendar and the seasons of how you folks operate? You also really, it also dictates, our Hawaiian calendar helps to dictate how you folks release things, like your makahiki. That was a big thing for many of us. And maybe you can just share a little bit about how that all, comes to how you folks release your products and the creative process and so forth.
So, I mean, like in the traditional fashion world, there are like four seasons: spring, fall, winter, and that's when you release your big collections and stuff. And early on, like from when we were even conceptualizing Kealopiko, we were just like, that's not us. Like that one, that's too much stuff. And two, like what is meaningful for us in our calendar, in our mindset. And we're like, oh, it's our seasons, makahiki and ku season really, or kauvela. And so all of our designs that we release during those seasons pertain to animals or plants or cultural practices or politics that happen during those seasons. So for example, like one of our first designs was a mano kihikihi, a hammerhead shark design, paired with a wili wili tree and the flower. And so we released those in ku season, because that's when the wili wili is flowering, and that's when the sharks are in close breeding. And so we made those conscious choices. And even still, like we just re-released our Big Five shirt, which is the five kamehamehas, and it's very political and kind of like ku'e, and we would never release that in makahiki season because it's not appropriate for that time of year. So it goes to the design. It also goes to the color choices that we make. And consciously, even within our mo'olelo tags, there's all this kauna. And just like in a Hawaiian song or in kanika or in any of our mo'olelo, there's all these level of kauna. So even in this garment, there's all that hidden kauna, and you gotta kind of piece it out and figure it out and be, ooh, that's what that really meant. Ooh, and that's what that really meant. Because it's all there. And also the amazing thing too is that sometimes some of the kauna might be there, and then this other piece comes in later, and you're like, oh, that's the kupuna at work, and they're throwing in their own kauna in there or their own hidden meanings. And so we've had some really awesome experiences like that over the years. But I do want to go back to Auntie Kaiulani's kind of question about Kealopiko and the mo'olelo tags. And really the whole impetus of this clothing company was because the three of us wanted to share the stories of our kupuna. Hina and I were walking around in the forest. We were both conservation botanists, and we were carrying our Olelo Hawaii, the Hawaiian language dictionary, into the forest with us. And most of you guys know Puku'i's book is not light, but the bago was in the backpack, and we was going up to the top of the mauna, and being looking at this lehua laden with dew. We're like, oh, what is that called? What is that called? Oh my gosh. And there was this whole story, and we're like, oh my gosh, we have to share this. And instead of we had talked about, starting a magazine, starting a blog, starting all these other things. And we're like, these are ways that are normal dissemination of information. And how can we disseminate information and share the stories of our kupuna in a different way? And we're like, oh, let's do it through art, through clothes, through the things that we wear every day. And so, it's just those choices that you make. Like for us, our number one value system is to share those voices from our kupuna. It's not to make money. It's not to make really cool products. It's to share that, and from that, all this other wealth or success or whatever has come, because in our na'au, it's always still about the kupuna.
I think it's amazing that you guys have been together for 16 years. I mean, that's a long time, especially for like three women that, you know, you start off, you're passionate, you have all these goals, but you've stuck to it for 16 years. And I'm just wondering for those other wahine out there that may want to, you know, start a venture or are on their own pathway, what are some of the lessons or learnings that came to you along the way that you think might be helpful for other wahine to hear?
Well,
I want to just add quick, sorry, just
Oh,
off of what Ane said before. And this maybe can connect to your question, but like wealth and success is all relative, right? Wealth is relative. Like the three of us all still have second jobs. You know, we still do the other things that we love and other things that nourish us. And you know, Kealopiko isn't to a point yet where any of us are gonna like retire and hang out. And I'm not sure that that's exactly the goal. It is, you know, like Ane said, we did this to start sharing the stories of our kupuna, but I think it's important to remember to nourish those things that feed you, right? And so we all choose actually as well to keep the other things going in our lives because that gives us inspiration and that comes into what we do. You know, if I wasn't translating and an internet avaiaulu, I wouldn't be exposed to half the great stuff that, you know, I can then think about and bring into my work with Kealopiko. If Ane wasn't out in the forest, you know, with the plants still looking after these kupuna who are like just on the lihi o ka make, you know, like just hanging on to survive, then she would lose that connection with what's really going on our ʻāina. Same thing for Jamie, you know, she's involved in all kinds of other amazing design projects and all sorts of things that feed into what she brings. And so I would say nurture your passions, you know, and be in it for the right reasons.
yeah. And then, you know, like the three of us were friends first. Like I was housemates with Jamie and friends and classmates with Hina. And, you know, like we've had our challenges over the years, you know, within our own personal relationships with each other. And I think, you know, as long as we continue to honor those values of our kupuna with aloha, you know, ho'oponopono, all of those foundational concepts that we apply them directly to our own personal relationships and then our business relationships, because, you know, they're all kind of intermixed, you know, because we're friends within your business partners and all that stuff. And it's really important just to keep the communication open and free flowing. And, you know, believe me, there have been roadblocks and bumps along the way, but you just have to, you know, if in your na'au, it's, you know, you have the purpose in mind with aloha, you know, you can hold a more.
Jamie, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think the different things that I've been involved in recently throughout the years, looking at many different kanaka wanting to start business or, you know, kind of take a new innovative approach within our communities. We've learned so many lessons throughout the 16 years, like so many about each other, about why we're doing it, you know, and I think also an important one is projecting where you're going, you know, so, you know, having that star of what's guiding you is really important. So, you know, having a vision, of moving into it with the right intentions, and then also just having the clarity of knowing where you're going, you know, and how that applies directly into the impact of our future of our lahui too, you know. I always don't want to be like heavy about like the kuleana that we all feel and carry, you know, because we deserve to like live lightly as well. but it's true, you know, just what we're kind of giving in the work that we do is really important, with the effects that it brings to our people in the future. So yeah, just having like a clear vision of where you're going with that is really important.
So
Oh, meteor
awesome.
band,
And
Pokey band.
Cookie, cookie.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I just want to, I don't know if you're looking at all of the comments and chats, because we're also kind of following on Facebook, but everybody's so inspired by your mo'olelo. So, you know, I think that just keep up that, you know, and there's a lot of friends from Aotearoa over there. Yeah, Mikai.
Oh.
But yeah, I think we have like about 10 more minutes. So if there's anything else, and I think Hina, you had a mo'olelo to help to wrap us up, or
I do. I might just leave just a last couple comments for towards the end. The one thing that I was going to see, maybe Jamie, if you wanted to touch on, because you have experience in both these areas, is the difference between, you know, being in a for-profit business and a nonprofit business, and sort of, again, that like ecosystem of kanaka businesses that we sit in. You have so much experience there. You want to share anything that in that realm?
Wait, who are you asking, Hina?
Oh, Jamie. Sorry.
Jamie. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about this question. I saw it in our notes earlier, but I mean, yes, we in Hawaii, we all know there's many nonprofit organizations that are doing amazing work and are going in that direction of a model of business, I guess. And then we're seeing more and more of for-profit businesses, you know, which is oftentimes a little bit more scarier and intimidating to kind of like jump into. But I guess just touching back on what I was talking about before, and also what Hina mentioned too, is like being the pioneer of whatever industry you're kind of starting is okay, you know? So like if there's not a model out there to follow or to kind of like take guidelines from, it doesn't mean that you can't do them or try them out. And you know, we've always been progressive people. I mean, it's even in a business context, like I just light up when I hear about our kupuna and how they kind of approached business like hundreds of years ago, and just the smart and the smartness of it, the strategies. And so it's within us, you know what I mean? Like it's nothing new. It may have been something that was covered up in most recent times, but it really isn't anything new or something that we should be intimidated going into and trying out in our own ways, in new ways. So
Yeah. I think too, one of the things that and like Jamie was saying, you know, it almost for-profit, nonprofit, in some ways it doesn't matter so much, but what, because you know, the motivation behind what you're doing is really the important thing. But I think one thing that we've seen that's been really wonderful for us in our own lives is the freedom that you have when you start your own business, you know. And yeah, my partners are both tremendously hardworking and really did a lot of the groundwork to lay down sort of daily business operations and stuff in the very beginning. Things that I didn't participate in, but they did this amazing job of sort of laying this kahua. And so that's a lot of hard work to put that in place. But what that allows for is for you to have complete freedom and flexibility in what you want to create, in how you spend your time, in how you set your schedule. Like Ane was saying, you know, the moms that work for us, if we can, we let them make a schedule that allows them to be at all their kids' soccer practices and surf meets, and, you know, do the things that matter to them with their ohana. And so, and it's also allowed the three of us that freedom and flexibility. You know, we don't have to, I think the 9 to 5 grind is one of the trappings of capitalism, you know, and that isn't a healthy way to run a business. We don't believe in that as individuals. And so why would we create a business that runs that way? You know, kanaka don't need more examples of how you like crack it and get everything you can out of everybody just to make that profit, you know, like the experience that our staff has, the lifestyles that we can live, those matter so much more to us when we talk about malama kanaka. You know, malama ʻāina and malama kanaka are the two strands we're always trying to look at and figure out, you know, those are the guiding threads that kind of run throughout. And when we look at that, we want to pick different things. And like Jamie said, there's not always examples, you know, you just have to go with your na'au, you have to go with the teachings that your kupuna left for you, right? And like the foundational teachings that we get from these moʻoku ʻaohao that show us that we need to malama each other and all of these kupuna that allowed us to be here. And so you get the flexibility to do that when you run your own business. It's a lot of hard work. It takes a lot, but it gives you a lot too. And you get to be who you are and action your values in a way that working for somebody else's corporation or thing doesn't allow.
See, you are a teacher, Hina. You're just not in a classroom. I love this earlier comment that said, you know, just like eating, if you eat the whole animal, there's nothing left to waste. So just like your company, right? No waste. And I was thinking of this rancher I was talking to many years ago, and she was saying, oh, she would take her cuts of her animal to the market, and people would come by and say, oh my gosh, $40 for that or $50 for that. And she'd be like, yeah, but with this $50, you can make 5 meals with that because there's nothing to waste. And nowadays we just want the boneless, skinless thighs or the fish fillets, and if we pay for the whole animal, we get so much more. And so, you know, in buying from Kealopiko, we are buying into all of your beliefs. And I just love that. And I think that this has been a really good opportunity for people to really understand, you know, what goes into every single piece of clothing that you folks put out. And, you know, that they're beautiful clothes. We love wearing them, but there's so much more to them. We are down to our last couple minutes, so I wanted to give each of you a time to say any last words, any last thoughts, any messages you want to give to those that are listening.
I would just like to mahalo each and every one of you. If you've bought, you know, something from us before, you've supported us and our lahui and our kupuna. So mahalo nui. And if you haven't purchased anything from us, don't feel pressure. But just mahalo for, you know, being a contributing part of our lahui. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I want to say mahalo too for having us and for the work you guys put into having these kinds of talk stories, and also to everyone who's supported and just been there for us throughout these years. It's really do appreciate it. I also want to shout out another business that we look up to, Hawaiian Force. They're coming up on a huge year of being in business, you know, and something that made me remind me about a conversation I had with Auntie Luana is that she shared, she's like, you know, having our own business, Craig and I, allows us to practice our sovereignty. And that hit deep when she said that. I think that was like 2 years ago. She's like, we're able to live in that every day by having our own business and doing what we do, and yeah, just holding that line, and very inspiring and influential. So with all of you that are either start in your own business or about to start your business or inspired by, you know, creating your own industry, like, it's amazing. Yeah, it's practicing our own sovereignty. So yeah, mahalo.
Oh, that's a beautiful note to tie things up on. Mahalo e nā hoa. And just wanted to bring it back again to the wahine who started it all, papahana moku tu haumea, because a lot of what's been said here today reflects what she gives us, and that's this idea of evolving and innovating. And so just keeping on trying new things, looking back to our kupuna for their ike and their guidance, moving out into new spaces to then bring back fresh ideas, and always being willing to be flexible and try again with each other in our relationships, and with the choices that we make in our lives. And so I mahalo her for all those ha'awina, and what she shows us about evolution and innovation. And so mahalo ya haumea, ina haumea apau, ina wahine apau, I hiki mai I keia kūkākūkā ana, mahalo anui keia hui ana o kākou.
Mahalo nui, you guys. That was awesome. And just want to let everybody know that this also was recorded. So if you want to go back and watch this again, or if you want to, if you were unable to, please let your friends know out there that this is available. And that our next month, it's breast cancer awareness. So we'll be talking to a few wahine that have survived cancer. And hold on, I'm trying to also share my screen at the same time. But again, mahalo to all of you, to Hina, to Ane, to Jamie, for all the work that you folks have done, and for really forging the path ahead that there was no guideline, well, actually it's not true. There was the blueprint of our kupuna and the work of our kupuna, polole. But mahalo again for all of you. And here, mahalo to our sponsors, to Hawaii's People Fund, Papa ʻAloha Kahi, OEVTV, E Kolumea Nui, Holu ʻAina, and Maili Kukahi ʻAina Momoana Academy, and the University of Hawaii for helping us with our webinars that we started over COVID. That's kind of how it started, and it's continued on with the help of all of you. And for those of you who want to, again, please stay connected with us for a few, I'm not sure, Auntie, how many more sessions we have left of this year, but great topics coming. And maybe we'll have a few of our friends here want to do their own. Nah. But mahalo nui ya oko pakahi apau. Hele ana mai no kumalama ana I keia halawai o ʻaha wahine kūhinapapa. Pomali e kako, aloha.
Aloha, mahalo.
Wiho.
Ke aloha.
Aloha.